E-mobility and battery markets are booming, and the end of that megatrend does not seem near. The company we're talking to today is called Lithiummetall and is developing technologies for the next generation of lithium-ion batteries. We're speaking with Tim Johnston, co-founder and director. Welcome, Tim.
Good morning.
Now, Tim, good talking to you. Before we start speaking about your latest, very exciting new venture called Lithiummetall, please give us a bit of background on yourself and tell us about your role at the company.
Yeah, no problem. From a technical perspective, I'm a mechanical engineer and CFA charter holder. I've had the pleasure of working in the lithium material space and battery technology areas since the late 2000s. And I originally started my career working for a major engineering firm, helping clients develop lithium assets and battery-related projects all over the world. But I left that in 2016 to start a number of new ventures over the last few years. Probably one of the most significant ventures to date outside of Lithiummetall, which we'll be talking about shortly, is a company called Li-Cycle. Li-Cycle is North America's largest recycler of lithium-ion batteries. I developed that company with my co-founder, RJ Kocher. From the ground, we developed the technology, we commercialized it. We ultimately took the company public in the US earlier this year and successfully raised over $550 million as part of our execution plan for building out the infrastructure that's going to support the recycling of lithium-ion batteries. That's one example of something I've been involved in, but Lithiummetall is something we're going to talk a little bit more detail about now.
Great. Well, as I said or alluded to in my introduction, the lithium space and battery space is booming, and almost every analyst you care to name is expecting very strong growth rates. Not a topic at the forefront of most retail investors' minds, at least not yet, are next generation lithium-ion batteries. Please tell us what this term means, or what you mean by that term, and what the landscape is, i.e. when will those batteries come to market, who's developing them, what will be the advantages? And of course, we would like to know about the market potential.
Of course. So what we refer to as next generation batteries is the evolution of the lithium-ion battery that we use today. One of the key benefits of these next generation batteries is higher energy density. They also have ancillary benefits like improved safety. But when we talk about higher energy density, what does that actually mean? That means that you can store more energy in that same size battery that you could relative to a lithium-ion battery. The benefit of that is that you only have so much space and weight that you can host this energy within a vehicle, whether or not that's an electric vehicle that goes on the road, whether or not that's a eVTOL sort of style vehicle that has to fly through our skies. You want to get as much energy into that space and that weight as possible to give you the longest possible range, the best performance outcomes, and other benefits associated with those key aspects. From a technical perspective, the key difference between what we call a lithium-ion battery and a next generation battery is the anode. In a traditional lithium-ion battery, we have a graphite-based anode, the physical structure that stores these lithium ions within that structure. In these next generation batteries, and there's various different types, we're talking about a metallic anode. And the benefit of that is that you can effectively get more of those lithium ions in that same area. And hence why we created Lithiummetall.
Very interesting. Now, what will Lithiummetall's contribution to these next gen batteries be in a bit more detail? Please tell us about the technology you are developing.
When we looked at the problem of next generation batteries, one of the things that we identified early on was the cost of this new anode. If we think about the rest of the battery is very similar. The cathode is essentially the same as a lithium-ion battery. There's a whole range of different electrolyte materials that are being used. But that anode material, the traditional way of thinking about next generation batteries was largely around using lithium foils. And what I mean by that is that you take an ingot of lithium, you extrude it, and then you roll it very, very thin. The challenge is there's limits to how thin you can roll it, and it's a very expensive process. In fact, when we looked at it, we identified that there was almost an order of magnitude increase in cost of the raw materials relative to the finished good of that anode because of those high manufacturing costs. What Lymetal is doing is we developed our own process and technology to develop an anode that is effectively an analog anode. It behaves exactly the same as that traditional lithium foil-based anode, but it has the benefit of containing less lithium, and we can make it at a much faster and lower cost than the traditional foil. How much lower cost? We're effectively back an order of magnitude in terms of the cost of the anode relative to the incumbent lithium foil anodes. That puts that anode in a similar cost price range as the traditional graphite anode for a lithium-ion battery, which is now making solid-state batteries commercially competitive with the traditional lithium-ion battery, whilst having all those enhanced features that we were talking about earlier.
Well, that certainly sounds, there's big advantages to that. Now, we're talking about you're developing these technologies, or you're commercializing, or on the road to commercialization of those technologies. Where are you along that road, and what steps are needed still to get you there?
We've been developing this technology for a number of years now, and what we've been able to do is go from a concept level through the prototype and testing phases. We've been able to validate with multiple what we call solid state or next generation battery producers, the viability, the technical viability of the product that we're producing. And we're now in the process of scaling up both the anode business, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in a moment, I'm sure, is the metal side of the business. Today, we're installing our first semi-commercial scale anode plant. It's located in Rochester, New York, and it's due to be commissioned by the end of this year.
Well, so you alluded to it. It's not only the new kind of anodes, it's also that you invented or developed a new process of producing your own lithium metal, and to boot, it's more eco-friendly. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, absolutely. The traditional way of making lithium metal was really structured around a very old technology for making sodium metal. And the key disadvantage of that process is really two. One is that the key input material is lithium chloride. Lithium chloride is less abundantly available relative to traditional lithium chemicals like lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide. But the other big disadvantage is that when you electrolyze, which is the process that you use for breaking apart that lithium chloride molecule to produce lithium, is you end up producing 5 tons of chlorine gas for every ton of lithium. So when you're talking about efficiencies, it's a relatively inefficient process of making lithium metal. Chlorine gas, of course, is highly toxic, corrosive, and difficult to handle. What we sought to do and what we've been able to demonstrate is that we can actually take lithium carbonate, which today is still the most abundantly produced lithium chemical in the world. And we're able to take that lithium carbonate, and using a similar process with some key differences, we're actually able to split that apart, and we end up producing the lithium metal at a very high purity without producing any chlorine gas. And that's a key differential. The other benefit is the energy that's required to split that molecule from lithium carbonate to lithium metal relative to lithium chloride to lithium metal is also about 30% less. So we end up with a net cost saving. We end up with a more environmental solution. And most importantly for our anode business is it gives us direct access to the lithium metal market. The reality is that there's only about half a dozen different producers of lithium metal in the world today. They're largely associated with nuclear states, as lithium metal for a long time was really predominantly used for the nuclear defense industry. And so those houses, limited supply, very high cost, and now we're able to be fully vertically integrated with both lithium metal production directly into anode production for these next generation batteries.
Sounds very interesting. And of course, high efficiency at lower costs is what everybody would like to have, I'm sure. So what are your next steps then? Well, what can we expect from Li-Metal in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah, one of the benefits of being early in this space is we've been able to be building out infrastructure for a long time. So as I said, we're in the process of commissioning our new semi-commercial plant in Rochester, New York. We're also in the process of constructing a demonstration facility for our lithium metal production here in Ontario, Canada. And so over the next months, you'll see more and more product come out of Li-Metal, which is really key, because what's happening in the industry at the moment is the various next generation battery companies are seeking these very important materials to help them qualify with their customers, i.e. predominantly the automotive customers, over the next couple of years. And so our goal is to become embedded in their supply chain, be an essential part of supplying these next generation batteries that we'll all end up using in years to come.
That's good. Also lots of news, hopefully, to look forward to. Now, as you said, you're relatively advanced along your paths already, although you haven't been listed as the Li-Metals for very long yet. Still, the company's market cap at current prices is about, I think, 312 million Canadian dollars. That's a pretty hefty valuation for a new development company that plans on starting commercial production, I think 4 years from now is what you aim at. Tell our audience, in your personal opinion, why you think that valuation is justified and why you see even more potential.
We're in a huge growth market in terms of the demand for what we're producing. At the end of the day, Li-Metal's been able to secure essential IP and processes and operational knowledge on what is going to be one of the key materials that goes into these next generation batteries. These next generation batteries provide significant advantages over the incumbent lithium-ion battery with higher energy densities, safer operations. And what we're seeking to do is be an essential part of that supply chain. When you look at the total addressable market as these batteries are commercialized, you're talking about a market that is growing at a rate of tens of billions of dollars a year of production demand. And so we see this really as the start. This is a time in which there is development going into the business, that we're growing that IP portfolio, that we're securing those key long-term customers, and we're generating a business that we believe has a long future with great earnings potential.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. That sounds like a perfect closing remark, and we'll be sure to check in later on your progress, probably next year. Thank you very much for taking the time, and good luck.
Thank you very much for having me.